At Consumer Cellular, you get the same exact coverage as the largest carriers, but for up to half the cost. Same thing, up to half the cost. Up to half the cost for the same thing. 50% the money for 100% the same thing. I hope I'm making myself clear. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Half the cost savings based on cost of Consumer Cellular single-line 5GB data plan with unlimited talk and text compared to lowest cost single-line postpaid unlimited talk, text, and data plan offered by T-Mobile and Verizon May 2023.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, in all honesty, I think we have to reveal that we are recording this on Tuesday evening for various boring technical reasons. So if there is a big story tomorrow, we're going to miss it, but that doesn't matter because we've got 48 big stories coming up in the course of the next hour, which we might rush through because we both want to watch the football. Also, not going to like you, you and I have had last couple of days have been at different ends of the glamour spectrum. Kieran, I've spent the last couple of days with my head in a bucket, and you've been off seeing Duran Duran and going to fancy London's posh restaurants.
Yes, and I've got to say, Duran Duran, who I've never bought a record of them, and because my sister contacted me to say, "Why are you going to see them? You never listened to Rio when we were kids." I go, "Yeah, I know, but give everybody a chance." I'm not in a position to talk to anybody about what they've been eating in recent years because I've piled on a few pans, but he's. Hungry like the wolf. I think Simon Le Bon has eaten not just the wolf, but the whole of the wolf pack. He's a solid-looking man, but he's still got an absolutely fantastic voice.
Yeah, he's Simon Le Bonbon now, isn't he? Planet Earth, I'll give you that. The rest of Duran Duran, I'm perfectly happy spending 24 hours with my head in a bucket, to be perfectly honest. We do have a lot of stories, Kieran, so we won't rattle through them because we're more professional than that, but we may perhaps have less Smiths-related Scooby-Doo chit-chat than usual, just so we deal with the proper stories. The first one, it's been a couple of weeks, Kieran, since we've had an Italian shirt-based digital sponsor shenanigan, but here we are with an Italian shirt-based digital sponsor shenanigan.
We are indeed, and isn't it absolutely amazing? Being sponsored by a Magic Beans company might result in you not being paid what is known as cash, and this is arisen in respect of Inter and Roma. I think we've spoken about Inter before. They had a deal with a blockchain-based company called Digitalbits, and that's fine. And I still bridle when I see the shirt because it's got to be Pirelli as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. But we're prepared to accept that the world does move on. Now, Digitalbits haven't paid Inter for the whole of the season. So Inter eventually said, well, we've had enough of this. And this was a pretty lucrative deal. It was supposedly worth £75 million over 4 years. So they sack them off, and people go, well, hold on. Digitalbits are also sponsoring Roma. You're allowed to sponsor more than one club. We've seen that in England and Scotland and so on. And then Digitalbits had paid the instalments. But when it got to the 31st of March, they decided, again, they weren't going to pay Roma, and Roma have acted far quicker in response to this. And they said, well, if that's the case, we're not going to publicise your wares. And Roma are having a good season under Mourinho. And the people said, okay, well, that's the risk you take when getting into bed with people from the crypto industry. But then we've got an interesting, in the loosest form of the word, interesting press release from Digitalbits, and they're going, oh, well, the non-payment's nothing to do with us. We do it through another company called Zitara, who are effectively our marketing company. They're responsible for all commercial contracts, and we've parted relations with Zitara. Yeah. To me, that just smacks of middle management speak. it's quite similar in many regards to what we saw with ITV Digital and the EFL, back in 2003, 2004. Where as far as the EFL were concerned, they'd signed a contract with ITV, and they didn't look at the small print. That's why lawyers are needed. And I've taken some criticism today for defending what lawyers do, but. At that time, the contract was with ITV Digital and not with Granada and Carlton, i.e. the big ITV companies. So the EFL lost a lot of money on the back of that. And it looks as if something similar could arise in relation to this digital bits advertising. So it's going to cost Inter, the thick end of £20 million this season. I don't know how much the Roma deal is worth, but it's... the club has done well in both sort of domestically and internationally in the European competition. So you can see the frustration. It's not the first time it's happened, though. We know what's happened with Football Insider, which was not really a stock market, even though it claimed to be, and yet these things just pop up like whack-a-mole. And this is what happens if you have an unregulated, highly volatile, and easily manipulated market.
Yeah, Kieran, how many times have I told you? Lawyers get paid thousands of pounds an hour. They can defend themselves. They don't need you jumping in front of the dog on their behalf, Kieran. Seriously, they get paid Swiss Ramble money, Kieran. They're fine. What I don't understand about this, Kieran, if you're talking about a League One team in England or a Serie B team in Italy who are tempted by the sort of money that Digitalbits, whoever, are offering, I would get that. But my rule surely is if the team is bigger in terms of reputation and global brand than the actual sponsor, then surely these teams should be a bit wary in the first place, shouldn't they?
They should be, but we've used this phrase before: blinded by the check. And even Manchester City have had some sponsors who, minor ones, admittedly, who don't look too clever. And Aston Villa and Everton, they've come in for criticism from their fans. Everton being sponsored by a Netherlands Antilles-based crypto casino. The optics of that look just pretty terrible, and you do get twitchy and genuinely worry about the certainty of which people will be paid.
Yeah, our listeners are very quick to help when I asked what the Italian for shenanigans was. Let's see how long it takes them to give me the Italian for blinded by the check. No Google Translate, anybody. I could do that myself. Many of our news stories start with FIFA President Gianni Infantino, Kieran, and many of them continue with "has got the hump with." So would you fill in this week's blank at the end?
Yes, he's got the hump with lefty, liberal, woke BBC, I believe, and other European broadcasters. And the reason for this is historically, FIFA have sold the rights to both the men's and the women's game in terms of the World Cup as a single product. And they've never actually said how much of that we formally allocate between the women's and the men's game. And the women's game is expanding. There's growing interest. We saw that at the Arsenal Wolfsburg match the other night. A record crowd, and there was genuine interest. And I think one of the things which intrigued me was that I've been to see some WSL matches. I've gone to see the Lionesses, and you do it historically, perhaps as a bit of a day out. Yeah, but now there's a bit more. There's a bit more. We really want to see the win. There's some genuine feeling about it, and that's great. That getting that degree of enthusiasm and commitment and passion in the game from the fans. It's always been there as far as the players are concerned, but I think that the fans are much more invested in it. So FIFA have the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, and today Infantino goes, I'm not happy with the amount of money that's been offered from European broadcasters, and he effectively cited the big five countries in Europe, England, Italy, Spain, Germany and France. And he says some of them are only offering 1% of the value of what we sold the men's games for. And you might, and intuitively, I think actually I've got a bit of sympathy, but there's more to this than meets the eye, because in my view, sort of talking to people in the broadcasting industry, the best women's games will get somewhere in the region of 50 to 60% of the number of viewers, as you perhaps see for a men's game. If the Lionesses get to the World Cup final, it will be a fantastic viewing figures. And remember, the biggest viewing figures for any live show last year was the Lionesses versus Germany. So there is certainly interest there. So therefore, should the broadcasters be doing more? Well, the BBC has a limited budget, and it's already effectively put its money into buying the rights for the 2026 Men's World Cup. So therefore, there's less to go around. Could we have seen one of the subscription channels bid to buy the rights? We could have, but we've not done so. And then there's the fact that the matches, in terms of kickoff times, aren't great for European audiences. I appreciate from the Southern Hemisphere, it's a completely different scenario. But because of the time difference between the UK and Australia, we're effectively 12 hours behind. So therefore, matches are kicking off potentially 4 a.m., 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Are you going to be getting good audiences for? And this is no disrespect to any of the teams there. If it's Denmark versus Senegal in a group game for the Women's World Cup in the UK, you're not going to be getting significant numbers. And that will have an impact upon what the national broadcasters are willing to pay. It's also have an impact upon what ITV would be willing to pay, because they always look, how much can we generate from our commercial partners in terms of advertisements and so on, and that effectively forms the budget. So I think there's an element of circumstance here, but then you go into the politics of FIFA. Now, FIFA launched around a year ago something called FIFA Plus, which is their streaming platform, and it's great. If you want to watch matches from those countries which don't have deals, it gives you an opportunity to see some international matches, to see football which you wouldn't otherwise see. FIFA make a bit of money, but they want to grow FIFA Plus. So if Infantino is successful here and does block matches being displayed on European national broadcast channels, if you do want to see the matches, you'll have to go onto the streaming platform, i.e. you're buying into FIFA's new product. And I think for people that are technologically literate, that's not an issue. But, older people, and I'm not being ageist here. I struggle with certain aspects of technology at my age, but older people might not feel comfortable with it. They might not have the resources. They might not have fast enough broadband. So therefore, I think the potential to have some spectacular viewing figures for the Women's World Cup, especially when you get to the final stages, will be lost. And if I was a commercial partner of FIFA who has paid money to have my products lined up as a senior sponsor of the competition, I'd be absolutely livid, because potentially I'm going to have fewer eyeballs, and I'd be very, very hacked off if that's the result. So as always with Infantino, there's more to this than meets the eye. And Is he right that FIFA should be paying equal amounts to the men's and the women's game? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody has any objection to that who's got a sense of fair play in their bones. And he's saying, well, we can't do it because of the media. And the reason why you can't do it, Jenny, is because of FIFA. Because FIFA have not historically allowed the women's game to be sold for separate rights. Yeah. And the thing is, nobody knows what the value is, and therefore you're going to start off with a low bid and then move on, hopefully to higher ones in due course, in a tournament which in the UK is going to struggle to get viewing figures for an awful lot of matches.
Well, that's nobody knows what the value is, Kieran, is one of the first points I wanted to make off the back of that, because Infantino said the offer from the European broadcaster so far is a slap in the face, but hasn't said what would constitute a tickle under the cheek, if you like. So he's said what he doesn't want, but he hasn't said what would be a suitable amount before pressing the nuclear button and saying, right, you're not getting it, full stop. But the other problem for ITV and BBC is that, and I don't know whether this has been enacted, but certainly Rishi Sunak was making noises that the Women's World Cup would be added to the so-called crown jewels of TV broadcasts that would be available free to air for everyone. And we've certainly, the Men's World Cup, nobody would expect to pay for that historically. The Women's Euros were such a big success that I think people would think that has to be free to air. And we would expect to see the Women's World Cup free to air as well. So there is a problem for ITV and BBC here if the government has committed them to show it for nothing, because eventually, I mean, it's going to be on telly in Europe, Kieran, eventually. It's just a little bit of posturing at the moment, isn't it, as you say?
Well, that strikes me as Infantino, trying to make a name for himself, as he did before the World Cup with his somewhat rambling, today I feel like a migrant worker. I've checked FIFA's accounts, Kevin. Oh, bloody hell, those migrant workers, they're an absolute shed load. If he feels that's the way he feels, today I feel gay and today I feel like a woman, and all of this. So he does act in a very strange manner, trying to get higher payments out of broadcasters. That's fine, but threatening to block them when it has, this is the paradox. There are people on social media who attack the BBC and attack Sky for promoting the women's game because they're dinosaurs. And now we've got the head of FIFA who does have a responsibility towards the whole game, saying we've got a fantastic product and we're not going to allow it to be shown on terrestrial television in Europe. Yeah.
It's been a big week for Burnley, Kieran, back in the Premier League, and there could be a bit of stardust being sprinkled over their success.
Yes, we have seen an announcement of new investment. This is from JJ Watt, who's an NFL star, and his wife, I hope I get this pronunciation correct, is Kalia. She is plays in Chicago. She's a professional footballer herself. She has played on a few occasions for the US women's national team, and also she's officially registered as blind in one eye. So to overcome that achievement, football's a tough enough game. Operating in with full eyesight is hats off. That's all I can say. How much have they put in? And whether this money is going to AL Capital, who are the majority shareholders, or whether it's fresh shares, we don't know. But this does appear to be a growing trend in respect of wealthy people from the US. So, I think Wrexham is the poster boy for this, I believe we're recording this on the Tuesday night. They've got the open bus parade, and Reynolds and McElhenney are going to be there, and I'm sure it'll be we'll see it in due course on a documentary. Bournemouth were taken over a few months ago. One of the investors there is Michael B. Jordan. We've got people connected to FSG from the sporting arena. So investing directly or indirectly in English football is becoming a thing for US celebrities and sports stars, and we've got further evidence of this here. Also, for me, the star is Vincent Kompany in terms of transforming sort of the culture of the club in terms of the way it plays and playing everybody off the park in that division. Absolutely amazing football. If anybody's seen Burnley play this season,
do you know who I feel sorry for, Kieran? A friend of mine bought an open air bus franchise in Croydon. He's never going to use that, is he? He thought that'd be an investment. It's just when we were in the semi-final of the FA Cup. He didn't. It's an imaginary friend, Kieran, for comedy purposes, but you didn't laugh as much as I thought you would, so I'm regretting it now.
Well, you said semi-final of the FA Cup, and I started twitching, didn't I?
Oh, sorry, Kieran. Yeah, that's how remiss of me to remind you that we have lost one more FA Cup final than you have. It's not a big boast, is it? Come back to us when you've lost twice at Wembley in the FA Cup final, Kieran. Always to Man United. They've stuffed us every bloody
us too.
Us too. I know, exactly. This may be premature, Kieran, but it looks like it's definitely going to happen because we are a day early. But Leeds United's defence, they can't keep managers, let alone clean sheets. So
Yes.
it looks like they're desperate for and it might be, Kieran, that Sam Allardyce comes back. He might get them a point from those last 4 games. I had him down for no points for the last 4 games. It might be that he gets them the 1 point that keeps them up. So it could be a good move, but we've seen it at Tottenham. We may see it at Chelsea. Just sacking the interim manager just seems to me to smack of desperation somehow.
Yeah, I mean, when clubs are having manager of the month competitions instead of goal of the month, you know we've reached a nadir in a particular club season. So why has this happened? Well, it comes down to money, as always. Yeah, we're fully aware that relegation is not good for a football club, but also I think that people are aware that Rads, who is the owner of Leeds United, is looking for an exit route, potentially an opportunity to buy into European football. The value of Leeds United as a Premier League club is, in my opinion, somewhere in the region of 350 to 400 million pounds. In the Championship, if somebody offered me 150 million, I'd snap their hands off. I mean, the highest price we've ever seen historically for a Championship club is actually Leeds United itself, when Radrizzani bought the club for around about 90 million a few years ago. So that's why we've had this change. They'll have to give a redundancy package to the manager that they may be potentially giving to Sam. Big Sam's coming in for 4 matches. This is, as you say, it's classic Big Sam material. But to go from Bielsa to Marsh to Garcia to Allardyce is quite a transition in terms of philosophy of football. And I think Sam Allardyce actually gets a hard press because people hear that they see the gels and they hear the voice. He is actually a progressive manager in some regards. How much is it going to cost Leeds? My understanding is that we're probably looking somewhere in the region of a £2 million bonus for keeping them up. And I know Everton are apparently will be paying Sean Dyche a £2 million bonus if he keeps them up. And that appears to be the going rate. It's what, 4 times 90 minutes. It's a good hourly rate on top of what he'll be paid anyway. And I think a bit like Neil Warnock, Sam Allardyce is one of those guys that can't say no because he misses football so much. You might be trying to put your feet up, but it isn't addictive. And when you talk to managers, I've had the privilege of talking to some over the years, and I'm sure you have as well. When you've interviewed for Match of the Day and so on, and they're fans of football in the same way as we are, except they just happen to have a slightly different role. Yeah.
It's interesting. People quite rightly talk about Allardyce and they say he was a very early adopter of sports science and data analysis, which he is. But basically what his talent is kicking asses and knocking heads together, which is you can analyse the data as much as you want for the last 4 games. You've just got to terrify them enough to keep a clean sheet in one of those games. It's interesting looking at Southampton and Leeds, Kieran, and listening to their fans because on the face of it, the Southampton and Leeds model is a good one, investing in young talent, homegrown talent, bringing them through. But if in that time you get relegated, you can understand why some fans say we just need to spend money at the start of the season on 28-year-olds who will keep us up and a manager like Sam Allardyce. It's very difficult to back young English coaches if they're not keeping you in the division and backing young talent if they're not keeping you in the division as well, especially when Sky are telling fans that the only place to be is the Premier League or they might as well give up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Although I've said on more than one occasion, Championship's far more fun.
Yeah, oh sure, yeah.
You've only got 3 days to be miserable after a defeat instead of a whole week. Which that's great in its own right. Whether you're Leeds or Everton or Forest or Leicester or wherever it is that's going to go down, there is a 99% chance that you will see more victories next season than this season. You'll get a chance to go to some other places. You will be a bigger fish in that particular pool, and it's a great division with some cracking football.
Kieran, it's easy. It's easy for you to say that because you've got how many points have you got?
More than 50.
Exactly, and Palace have got 40, so it's easy for me to say that as well. If I was on 27 points and you just said what you said then, I'd be really cross I'd be putting my head back in the bucket because I'd rather stay where we are. There's no denying that Everton are one of the teams in trouble, Kieran. And the next two stories take us to that side of the city that you love so much.
Yes, and first of all, we've got the Everton Fans Advisory Board now. In response to a letter from Bill Kenwright, where he defended the fellow directors at the club. This might have been the right thing, but it was certainly not the right time.
Right.
And that's angered the fans. And what they've said is we would like the owner of the club to sack Bill Kenwright on the back of that. I don't think that's going to make a difference to what happens on the pitch. So I think it will be symbolic, given that Bill Kenwright and the other directors have not attended a match physically since January because there's been accusations of hostility from fans to the directors. And we've also seen something similar from Leeds United, who we've just been talking about, that their fans group has said we just don't feel comfortable with the way that the club's being run. And I think this sort of brings us to an interesting position. One of the recommendations of the Tracy Crouch fan-led review was
Thank God. You've reassured a lot of people, Kieran. I'm sure you noticed on Twitter that when we were talking about changing club names in the last pod, everyone was expecting you to go, it won't be able to happen. You didn't mention the independent fan-led review, and people are worried. So they'll be pleased. You've reassured them now, Kieran. Well done.
I'm playing the long game here, Kevin. I'm playing the long game. So one of the things that was contained in the fan-led review, which has subsequently got, we're hoping will be part of the white paper and legislation, is for there to be a representation of fans, there to be proper liaison between football clubs and fans. And the Premier League's reluctance to adopt the white paper is, you'll get fans trying to run the club. Now, when there are things like this taking place, I absolutely understand where the fans are coming from. I absolutely understand their anger. This is playing into the hands of the Premier League to say, well, you've now got the fans trying to dictate who should be and who should not be directors. First of all, the fans have no power in terms of vote. So it's a spurious argument from the Premier League. But given the way that they are lining up people to try to take down the fan-led review, I think as fans we've also got to be there with our responses to this. If you're in the as you said, if you're on 27 points at this time of season, you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be looking for somebody who you feel has made bad decisions. And when I'm teaching on the football courses, I always say we start off. What are the three biggest components of success and failure when it comes to a football club? And it is resources, opportunities, and decision making. Mm-hmm. And in the case of both Leeds United and Everton Football Club, they've certainly got resources because Farhad Moshiri stuck £500 million into the club. Leeds United have spent record levels themselves. They've got opportunities. They've got big fan bases. Everton are moving to a new stadium and so on. So they've got two things which should keep them above that relegation zone so close to the end of the season. And then we come to the third element, which is the quality of the decision making. Mm. And I think this is where we could perhaps say they've been making wrong decisions, certainly in terms of what's happening on the pitch. And look, this isn't a football show, as we've always said, but I'm trying to look at this here from a management perspective, from a business perspective. And if it was in another industry, you'd say, well, if you have spent considerably more money than your peer group and you have performed worse, then somebody would have to go. Now, normally, in business, it would be the shareholders saying, we're going to get rid of the board of directors. Football being football, it's the board of directors say, well, we don't particularly like the idea of that. What we'll do instead is that we'll sack the coach.
Yeah, before we move on to the second part of the Everton story, Kieran, and I understand what you're saying about the fans' letter, but I mean, if you're allowed to sit in a pub and demand the sacking of somebody, you probably should be allowed to send a letter to do the same thing. But I'm not defending Bill Kenwright here at all, especially what he said in that letter. But it seems to me that they're picking on the wrong person. As an outsider, it seems to me that Everton didn't pull up any trees under Bill Kenwright, but they sort of played within their financial. I'm mixing metaphors here, but within their financial cloth, you know what I mean? In the same way that Palace did under Ron Nodes. And it seems to me that the real problems came when the new owner came in. And it might be that Bill Kenwright sold to the wrong people. I don't know. And of course, there's that particular problem for Everton because everything is viewed through the prism of the other club in the city, success and failure. But, for a long time, Everton were a top 10 Premier League club. And it seems odd to me and a little bit sad because to an outsider, and I'm happy for Everton fans to put me right on this, to an outsider, Bill Kenwright seemed like somebody who dedicated a lot of his own money and time, obviously, to a club that he loved.
Yeah, there's no doubting his affection for the club, that he does consider himself to be an Evertonian because he's been going since he was knee high to a grasshopper, as have many other fans. At this time of year, we're all a bit anxious, and a bit angry, and that's why we've ended up with this position.
Yeah, and the second part of the story, Kieran, involves what might happen financially to some of the players if Everton do go down.
Yes, and again, it comes back to what I've just been referring to in terms of decision making. Now, one of the decisions that a club makes is the nature of the contracts that it offers to players. If you talk to the people at Brighton and Bournemouth and Palace and so on, we know that at the start of the season, our first objective is 17th position.
Yeah.
Everything else ultimately is a bonus. And if you have a good run, absolutely great. But, you're looking for 38 points realistically at the start of the season. And then you can start to have greater ambitions. And what you're also saying is that we also have to acknowledge that we know that there's probably now 7 clubs that are never going to be relegated from the Premier League.
Yeah.
So therefore, we're looking at 3 out of 13. There's a 25% chance at the start of the season of being relegated, or just under 25%. And therefore, we need to protect the club accordingly. And Steve Parish was talking recently. He was saying that even with parachute payments, we face the thick end of a £100 million reduction in our revenue. Yeah. And how do we deal with that? We deal with that by having relegation clauses in our contracts for players. Everton have not done that traditionally. Right. Now, that could be because of a misplaced sense of worth by the owners. And they'll also point out, well, hold on, Everton haven't been relegated for 70 years, so therefore we don't need relegation clauses in contracts. So I absolutely understand that. But it would now appear that Everton, if these stories in the newspapers are correct, and we always have to take these with a dose of salt, if these stories are correct, what's going to happen when Everton are relegated is that those players that were signed before summer 2022 are safe. They are locked in to their contracts. Those players that have been signed since the start of the season, and let the buyer beware. Nobody forced the player to sign the contract, will have to take a pay reduction. Speaking to chief executives of clubs that have been through relegation, they say, we can normally get a maximum of 20 to 25% reduction. Anything else, and the players won't sign the contract. So you could therefore end up with a pretty much split changing room where you've got 3 or 4 players, and one will say, well, okay, I've taken a $10,000 a week pay cut. I'm not happy about it, but I wanted to play for Everton. They're not going to be on paupers' wages, as we know. And then they're looking at one of their colleagues who put in performances which also contributed towards relegation. This is no way guaranteed. Everton might get a couple of good results, and ultimately, if they get 2 wins out of the last 4 games, they're safe.
Yeah, one arguably, yeah.
But what happens here is that you get a fractured changing room, and people will go, well, I've taken a pay cut, he hasn't, and that is not good for morale in any way, shape, or form.
Well, talking of morale, Kieran, Sheffield United promoted to the Premier League. There was some debate on social media and on 606 this weekend, which I increasingly wonder why I listen to, so I hate it so much. Some kind of masochism involved there. But there was some humour about Sheffield United creating their own trophy for finishing second. But they have been promoted to the Premier League, Kieran, which, according to your theory, must mean their fans are furious, because they want to be in a championship where they can play 2 games a week and have 3 days to recover and go to new grounds. But we know where they're playing next season, Kim, but we don't know who they're being owned by next season, because the potential high-profile takeover by Dozy Mbrosi looks like it may definitely not be happening.
Yes, there was a report in the Times that Dozy Mbrosi had withdrawn his interest, and the reason for this is that he'd had a falling out with the existing owner of Sheffield United, is Prince Abdullah. Apparently, originally they'd agreed a £115 million price, with Sheffield United being in the Championship, but also being in receipt of parachute payments. Dozy Mbrosi has put in, according to his sources, he's put in the thick end of £9 million into the club, and we know that Sheffield United have had some cash flow problems, so it's contributed towards the club being promoted, and he should be given some credit for that if these stories are true. And then he himself has now come out with a press release to say, actually, I don't particularly get on with Prince Abdullah, but I've withdrawn my withdrawal.
Right,
as it were,
okay.
And I'm still thinking of buying the club. But then you go, well, okay, this has been dragging on for some time. What's likely to be the fly in the ointment here? Well, that's going to be the issue of the EFL and the owners and directors test. And it does seem strange that somebody who has had county court judgments against them for renting properties here in the UK is in the position to put in £9 million of spare cash during the course of the season, and then there's £115 million to put in at a later stage as well. So wait and see. But it's messy, and it's a fantastic achievement to get promoted, given that the club has been subject to a transfer embargo, and things have been tricky. So you've got to give the manager and the players a lot of credit for what they've done, and also to have done it with games to spare. But you now get to that awkward position of transfer budgets, recruitment budgets for the summer. And if you don't know who the owners are, you don't really know with any degree of certainty what that budget is going to be. There's always a case for the existing owner saying, well, I'm looking for an exit route, so it's somebody else's problem. But of course, that somebody else isn't in a position to say, yes, I can sanction this particular signing or not. So it's essential that this deal, whatever happens, is sorted out quickly.
2 things here, Kieran. The first one I'm slightly confused by. So Dozy's put in £9 million towards the day-to-day running of the club in recent months. If he then ends up not buying the club, has he lost that money? Does he get that money back? Has it gone?
Well, I would imagine he will be consulting his legal advisors.
Okay.
If that money was put in as a donation, then no, but it's more likely, I would imagine he would have been advised to formalise the relationship and to put it in as a loan. So therefore he should be able to get it out. Potentially he should be able to get it out plus some form of bonus connected to the club being promoted. But without seeing the small print of any paperwork, you can't make a final conclusion with regards to that.
I know the answer to this question, Kieran, but just for those listeners, I'm going to say listeners listening, that's really annoying. Just for those people listening, I can't even be asked to get Guy to edit that either. It's just going to make me sound slovenly. The owners and the directors' rules, will they be different now that he's trying to take over a Premier League club than an EFL club?
Yes, they are. I mean, whilst theoretically they're the same, the Premier League has greater resources to investigate ownership. And we saw this with Saudi Arabia and PIF, and we don't know what's happening in relation to Newcastle, because Richard Masters was being very coy when he was asked by a parliamentary committee in that there Westminster type area about what was happening in respect of Newcastle. But my understanding is the Premier League's got a bigger budget, and therefore it tends to go into things in more depth. So this could be a further issue, because Sheffield United have been promoted, but they are not yet shareholders in the Football Association Premier League Limited. Though that transfer normally takes place on the 1st of July, or pretty close to the 1st of July when the year ends. So it gets a bit messy.
Oh, right. So it might be better for all concerned if they get this sorted by the 1st of July then?
Yes, because then effectively, whilst Sheffield United are under the umbrella of the EFL, the EFL will be continuing with the investigations. They can sign off, and then it's a lot easier, I think, for the Premier League to inherit this as an issue.
And talking of potential new owners, Kieran, this is not in the script Guy sent us a little while ago, because it only came up a few minutes ago. But there's rumours that Jim Ratcliffe has said that he will. If he wants to continue his takeover bid, he wants to take over the transfer policy as of now. Is that standard procedure?
No, because what happens if the Glazers decide to accept the offer from Sheikh Jassim, and you've had Jim Ratcliffe being involved? I absolutely understand why he has said what he has said, because it puts further pressure on the Glazers to make a decision sooner rather than later. And I was on a Manchester United show earlier today, and effectively saying that it's always a big summer for a club the stature of Manchester United. But in terms of budget, there's two things. There's the quantum of the budget. How much would the Glazers have approved? How much would a new owner? It could be that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to approve more or less. And then, of course, you've got to say, well, okay, what are we going to spend it on? Is Jim Ratcliffe going to bring in his own ops team with regards to changing the philosophy in terms of player recruitment? Or is he going to be maintained with what we have presently at Manchester United? So what he's doing is he's putting pressure on the Glazers, trying to hurry them up in terms of making a decision. At the same time, reading some of the press reports, he has offered a wee bit more overall, even though it will end up with him spending less money, because he's not buying all of the shares, but he values the club overall a wee bit higher. And we could have two of the Glazers still involved, A, as shareholders, B, potentially as directors as well, and then we're having some board influence. So very complex, but it's a smart move from a PR point of view, I think, from Ratcliffe.
It's not going to be a good summer for another United, Kieran, and that's Hartlepool. And our next two stories take us there.
Yes. The Victoria Park, as I know it, and I suspect you know it,
indeed.
Or the Suit Direct Stadium, as they would rather have it referred to. Hartlepool United have been relegated to the National League. This isn't the first time this has happened, of course. The club was acquired by a guy called Raj Singh, who lives locally, my understanding, in 2018. Hartlepool have been losing probably in the region of £300,000 to £400,000 a year in recent times. So not great, but the owner has said, my time is done. I've tried to allow the club to survive. It's not worked. When that happens, we're fully aware in the stories we've already been discussing, a deteriorating relationship between fan base and owner. Things get toxic, and it looks like the owner is saying, that's me off ski. Who's he going to sell it to? Because the National League is a very, very competitive division.
Yeah.
Hartlepool United It's a great ground to travel to. If anybody has not been there, I'd thoroughly recommend it. There's good eating and drinking establishments nearby, especially if you're going on a first date with somebody. But that's a separate issue. But who would buy it? Given that there's limited opportunities to grow the fan base in terms of attendances. It's a fantastic community club. It does an awful lot of work. And this is my concerns now, is that if the owner has reached that position where they no longer want to be the owner, what's going to happen to that £300,000 to £400,000 a year, which was effectively being put in by the owner to allow the club to meet its financial obligations.
I suppose as well, Kieran, sorry to interrupt, but Hartlepool fans will hate me for saying this, but the probable continued growth of Newcastle is going to make it even harder in the next 5 to 10 years to encourage local kids to support Hartlepool rather than them, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. Newcastle have a spectacular season. They are going to be playing in the Champions League next season. Yeah. I think we all know who the 4 Champions League teams are going to be. That's effectively now sorted. The club is heading in an upwards direction in terms of its opportunities, and therefore, if you are the local kid, the glamour of Newcastle versus the local charm and character of Hartlepool, it becomes that much tougher. I remember being in Brighton in the mid 90s when we were in the 4th division, and you didn't see kids wearing Brighton shirts because effectively it was an embarrassment to do so when you could buy a Chelsea shirt or a Manchester United shirt or an Arsenal shirt. I absolutely understood it.
I hated it. Crawley shirt or a White Hawk shirt. Yeah. I can carry on if you want, Kieran. I know quite a Lewis shirt. You know what Hartlepool need to do? Start playing games on a Friday night. Yes, that could be an idea. I remember going to Stockport and Tranmere Rovers when I was a student because football drove practically everything I did when I was at university, and it would be go to a match somewhere, normally at Old Trafford or Main Road on a Saturday, because it was so cheap to get in those days. And Friday nights would be Rochdale or Stockport or Tranmere, because the clubs used to play there in order to try to attract the sort of the casual fan. Thursday night Buzzcocks, Friday night Tranmere. You're like a Tony Wilson documentary, Kieran. Whoever takes over Hartlepool United has got an ongoing. This is the level of detail that we get into on this pod, Kieran. Has got a level of a HR issue that they're going to have to deal with, haven't they? Yes. This is a really sad story. This is to do with the former bar manager, Danielle Kearns, of Hartlepool United. She was originally taken on sort of as the country was coming out of COVID and lockdown to do 16 hours a week to be the bar manager. And she's very good at her job, by all accounts. And she ended up working substantially more than 16 hours a week because we were playing so many fixtures. It was Saturday, Tuesday. There were other members of staff who were getting COVID, and Danielle was covering for them, but she was only being paid for 16 hours a week. And when she kept her own tally of the number of hours and said to the club, I'm working effectively for half of minimum wage, or some horrendous hourly rate. And the club said originally, well, we'll give you a token 25 hours of overtime. She said, well, actually, I've worked hundreds of hours. These are all the details. These are the times you've asked me to come in. This is when you've asked me to come in to cover not different people in different operations of the club. And I've done so, because I'm trying to be a professional person. And in the end, she reached the stage where it was affecting her health and things were getting unpleasant, and she's ended up having to put in a legal claim in respect of the club for effectively unlawful deduction of wages. She's done the hours, she's not been paid. The club is going to have to pay her £3,500, and it's petty and it's mean-spirited, and it does not reflect well on the people in control of the club making those decisions. I don't think we can stress this enough, Kieran. right from the start of this pod, whatever level, if you're listening to this podcast and you own a football club, at whatever level, if you're in the 92, if you're way, way down the pyramid, if it's a Sunday League team, you will have a Danielle working at your club. Every single club in this country has got a Danielle or a Ron who's been a steward and a car park attendant for 50 years. Look after them. Look after them first before you look after the players, because they're the people who represent the spirit of your club. And it's a terrible word, but they're the forward-facing aspect. They're the people that your fans see on a daily match day basis. Look after them for the sake of £3,000. Look after the Danielles of this world, really. And fans will thank you for it. We mentioned US investors, Kieran, in British clubs. I nearly said English then. That would have been a huge mistake. Would have got me a lot of terrible tweets. These are less glamorous than Burnley, perhaps, and Wrexham, but Swansea City have got some money coming their way, it looks like.
Yes. Swansea City are controlled mainly by Jason Levine and Steve Kaplan. The Supporters Trust do own an element of the club as well, and I did a podcast with the Supporters Trust in relation to the club's finances a few days ago. But they have been losing $400,000 a week because they're in the Championship. For all the good that exists in the Championship, I've been saying, when it comes to the finances, it's a clown car. There's wheels popping off. There's glitter all over the place. There's horrendous things, left, right, and centre. So they've got 3 new American investors who are putting in around about £10 million, which is going to allow the club to pay the bills.
Is that between them, Kieran, or each?
That's between them, right, yes. Yeah. And it's further evidence that US investors have fallen for football in the EFL, in the National League, in the Premier League. Some people are saying, should we be wary about it? I don't think so. I've always taken the view that the place where you're born doesn't determine your values. Yeah, you determine your values, and you take ownership of them. So there has been some concern and reservations. But of course, if we have a white paper, which was put together with the help of Tracy Crouch, then we will be in a stronger position to defend the values and the history and the heritage of the game. And we can all move forwards whilst still making it an attractive proposition for investors. So stick that in your pipe, Premier League.
Well, talking of attractive propositions for investors, Morecambe are getting a bit of cash injected.
Yes, Morecambe have had problems. They were put up for sale by Bond Investments in September 2022. Their owners also own Worcester Warriors Rugby Club, which has effectively struggled to be in existence. And we had this discussion a few months ago about a gentleman called Sarbjot Johal, who is from Solihull, and he's made his money in soft drinks. He's 20 years old. And by all accounts, he's put a load of money in to allow the club to make its financial obligations, to pay its bills. And if that is the case, fair play to him. But again, there seems to be slow progress in terms of the owners and directors test. And this is another reason for perhaps having 2 cheers rather than 3. The EFL are doing a far more thorough job than they were doing a few years ago. And I think that is to protect clubs from people with inappropriate objectives and people who are just doing it for their own benefit rather than that of the football club. But it's a club which is punching above its weight in League One, and it's not guaranteed a place in League One. It's come for a long way. Again, it's got a natural ceiling in terms of its fan base, and it tries to be successful by having a bit more of a smarter approach than a bigger spending approach in that division.
Now, Kieran, we were in the North East a moment ago. And we mentioned this club, regardless of the politics of Newcastle this season, regardless of what you feel about their success, I think only the most curmudgeonly of traditional football fans and those based in Sunderland could disagree that Newcastle's kit is one of the greats. I mean, and it's inspired kits all over the world. I know it was inspired by Notts County, I believe, originally, but that black and white striped kit, certainly you see some of the old photos, is fantastic. But for me, this year, spoilt by just having something splurged in light blue across it. And it seems like they'll be resolving that next season, hopefully, and making a bit of money into the bargain.
Yes. If you take a look at the commercial income of Newcastle United, in 2007, when Mike Ashley took over, it was making £27 million a year. To give you some context, that was £2 million more than Manchester City.
Wow.
Fast forward to 2022, and Newcastle United are making £280 million less than Manchester City in terms of their commercial income. Mike Ashley, he ran the club from a sustainable perspective in an okay way. It did tend to broadly meet its obligations. But he was, his team were not great at building the brand of Newcastle. So it now looks that Newcastle United from next season will have a new front of shirt sponsor, which is going to be worth around £25 million. Now, if these reports are correct, it's certainly going to be the biggest front of shirt deal outside of the traditional sneaky six.
Yeah.
And it is going to be based in a Middle Eastern company. But the reports are it's not going to be from an organisation in Saudi Arabia. And this can only help Newcastle in terms of their ambitions, A, to progress the club in terms of what it can pay for players and wages and so on, and B, to ensure that what we have at present from those other six clubs is an attempt to keep Newcastle in what those six clubs consider to be its rightful place. So this will be a very good deal. It's probably be worth 3 times the amount that the club has presently from Fun 88. And it will, of course, allow the club to compete more. And people are saying, well, how do they get away with it? It's not a case of getting away with it. They'll be in the Champions League next season. The Champions League is where it's at as far as eyeballs are concerned midweek. And therefore, this will help Newcastle to defend the position from what we know as the fair value panel when it comes to assessing the value of individual commercial contracts.
Why does it make so? I mean, even if the company were to be a Saudi Arabian company sponsoring them, if it wasn't part of the Saudi Arabian government, and I know there are people who say there's nothing in that company that isn't in that country that isn't part of the government, why would that make such a big difference?
I think what Newcastle are doing is quite savvy. That they are saying that there's increased interest in the MENA area, geographical area, because of the big noise that Newcastle have made in terms of what they've delivered on the pitch. And therefore, we're demonstrating this by being able to negotiate a deal with a non-Saudi country. So therefore, there can be no accusations of government interference or influence. Okay. And in addition to that, it allows Newcastle United to sign sort of second and third tier deals with sponsors in Saudi Arabia and say, well, look, our front of shirt deal is worth 25 million. So therefore, this deal for such and such must be, that's okay at 3 million. That's okay at 2 million. And I think that's what you will see the club doing, is increasing its portfolio of commercial partners in the general geographical area, and in doing so, being able to substantially increase commercial income from where we stand at present.
I suppose you could argue, Kieran, though, that whoever had taken over Newcastle, whether it had been a sovereign state or another individual, was always going to be taken over a more attractive brand, because it was Mike Ashley that was poised. It wasn't the Newcastle United brand that was turning people off. It was the Sports Direct Mike Ashley brand, wasn't it?
You're absolutely right, because Newcastle fans, and this is where sort of the non-violent direct action approach taken by many supporters is something which clubs are slowly starting to cotton on to. That if the fans don't like the owner, then there's ways of impacting things. And Mike Ashley was a negative influence as in terms of popularity. So therefore, if I was a sponsor, I'd say, ultimately, I want a front of shirt deal, or I want some perimeter advertising deal. I know that there's a big chance that the fans will go onto social media and they'll start writing rude things or giving me bad grades in terms of TripAdvisor or Trustpilot or these other things, and therefore let's go to another club, and that way we don't have that problem. And I think when fans are organised, and Newcastle fans have become quite organised as a result of the antipathy towards Mike Ashley is concerned, this can result in the club being hit financially, because that ultimately owners care about money a lot more than they care about football in the vast majority of cases. That's not a universal accusation.
These are heady times, Kieran, for Coventry City, and who would begrudge them after the years they've had? They're one of that group of clubs in that really exciting race for the playoff spot, and they've had some good news about their home ground this year.
Yes, I mean there's been a lot of uncertainty because the RICO. I know it's called the Coventry Building, so it's the RICO. Because the company operating that went into administration, and it was then subsequently bought by, guess who? Mike Ashley. The stadiums was bought by Mike Ashley's Fraser Group. People were saying, well, why did they do that? It's because Mike Ashley himself got his fingers burnt when he was trying to buy Derby County, because he could buy the football club, but not the stadium, because it was owned by Mel Morris, who didn't want Mike Ashley involved. So, Mike Ashley, he learns very quickly from these events. He bought the stadium. Initially, he said to Coventry, I'll let you stay there till the end of the year. But the good news now is that we have a 5-year deal. Doug King, who is the new owner of Coventry, said he's, let's be honest, we're in negotiations. The aim is to buy the stadium from the Fraser Group. It's of no use to the Fraser Group. Apart from doing a deal on Dublin and flipping at a profit, and that's the reason for it. So if that is the case, I'm sure Cov fans will be absolutely delighted if they have their team in the Premier League, which is very exciting, by the way. They've been away for a long period of time, and they'll have that degree of certainty and comfort that some of the things that they've had to do, going to Northampton and Birmingham and so on, and the uncertainty of tenure, that could be lifted if you get club and stadium under the same corporate roof. That helps.
Yeah, we're nearing the end of this marathon pod, Kieran. Just 4 stories to go. 2 of them are about broadcasting deals, one based at home and one based in our favourite European basket case.
Yes. Well, it looks like the EFL will be in a position to approve a new TV deal. Sky have been announced as the preferred partners. There's always been a good relationship between the EFL and Sky, and I think Sky put on a fantastic product, and I think that will be a contributory factor. We don't know the numbers involved, but there does appear to have been far more competition than there has been historically. So we're presently in a £119 million a year deal. There is talk of that going closer to 200, which would be absolutely fantastic. We've always said when it comes to money and TV deals, there's 2 issues. There's the size of the pie, and there's how you cut the pie. The pie is going to be bigger. That means that the gap between the Championship and League One is going to grow substantially as well, because for every pound that you get in League One, you get around about £6.50 in the Championship. So we've often spoken about the gap between the Premier League and the Championship, and that causing dysfunctional behaviour. My concern is that the gap between the Championship and League One is going to cause us something similar.
And to our favourite red and blue based basket case.
Yes. Red and blue Barcelona, of course. They have used every economic lever that they possibly can. La Liga itself has said, we're not going to allow you to sell more than 5% on any other economic levers, i.e. effectively selling your future rights. But Barca TV, which you intuitively would think would be quite successful, does in fact lose money, as does Manchester United TV, as does Chelsea TV. These channels don't really make money because what ultimately you're buying. Do you want to go and see? You might subscribe for a month or two, and then having an interview with the groundsman and watching the under-23s play pre-recorded matches. You go, I'm not really getting an awful lot of money. It's costing me 80 or 90 quid a year for this. Yeah, that's
you say that, Kieran, but I wouldn't know what Luka Milivojic's favourite burger was if it wasn't for that. There's no other way of finding out what Joel Ward's favourite Springsteen song is either. This level of journalism is something you carry on. Sorry, Kieran.
That's true. So in respect of Barcelona, what they said is, right, we're losing money. We're likely to be in seriously hot water with La Liga in respect of their cost control measures this summer. We want to get Messi back. I think that ship's probably flown, or is even sailed. Even more importantly, if flying ships, whatever next.
Starships? You could have a starship, the Enterprise, that flies.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, yeah. Fair point.
Flying Dutchman?
Oh, yeah.
Great opera. Yeah, Kieran.
So they're just going to close down the channel. People are going to lose their jobs on the back of this because they cannot run the organisation as a business. So they've identified this as a loss-making part, and therefore they're closing down their own TV channel. What an indictment of the people in charge of that club!
It's a terrible indictment of the people in charge of that club, Kieran. And I'm not laughing at it because it doesn't make it funny that people are losing their jobs just because they're abroad. It's outrageous, but what baffles me about it, Kieran, is that Barcelona's business model normally is them finding a way to make money out of something. You'd imagine that they would find somebody who would take it off their hands at some kind of ludicrous billions of euros profit, which they then set against something else. It's an odd one. It's almost an admission of defeat for a giant club like that to say we can't make money out of this, so we're just cutting it. And again, it comes back to Danielle at Hartlepool. Fans don't like it. I mean, even fans of a giant club like that are going to be going, "No, don't make people unemployed. There's ways around this. We'll do without Messi." It's as you say, indictment. 2 more stories, Kieran, and one of them is generated by you.
Yes, it was on the back of some fans saying, How does everybody make a profit selling players in the Premier League? Because if you have 20 clubs making a profit, then nobody's making a loss.
Hang on.
So
work that out. Oh yeah.
So I had a look at the numbers, and between them, the clubs in the Premier League, I think they made £670 million from selling players. And people say, "Well, how can you do this?" So, okay, this is what happens when I get people sending me direct messages on social media because they realise this is a way of circumventing the 9-month waiting list to get a question answered on the Price of Football's Monday morning podcast. But I'm not encouraging people to do this. I can
stop following them back. How many times have I told you?
Yes, yes. I can't afford a divorce. Answering all these questions. What I worked out is that the reason for this is that we are comparing the value of the player after the contract has been amortized to the sale price. And this is sort of this is how dumb the world of accounting is. You sign a player for £50 million on a 5-year contract, so it gets amortized 10 million a year. You sell the player 3 years later for £30 million. You say, well, hold on, I bought him for 50. I've sold him for 30. He's still got 2 years left on his contract, so he's still at full value as far as the markets are concerned. So we've lost £20 million, but you say, well, actually, his amortised value is 20 million. We've sold the player for 30. So the accountants stick in a profit of £10 million. So if you do it from a cash basis, i.e. comparing what we've bought players for to what we've sold them for, the Premier League actually lost £600 million in 2022, but it's posting an accounting profit of 670. So when people go to an accountant and they say, we've given you the books, what do you think profit is? The accountant's answer is, what do you want it to be? Yeah. Because the accountants can do things like this.
Our final story, you make accountants sound like superheroes then, Kieran. That sounded like the trailer to a film. It just needs that deep voice. Accountants can do... I've had an infection, I can't do it. Our final story, Kieran, is yet another one, I'm pleased to say, that illustrates the gulf between the perception of some Premier League footballers as spoilt, lazy brats and the reality. And in the same way as we saw that video go viral yesterday of Leeds players ignoring a young child, because all the Leeds players that hadn't ignored the young child and had spoken to him and shaken his hand and high-fived him and had photographs taken were edited out of that video, which is what people tend to do psychologically about footballers. Another one has done a very good thing.
Yes, this is both a fantastic story and an indictment of football in 2023. So Trent Alexander-Arnold, a 24-year-old local lad from Liverpool, he is setting up a scheme to help the 99.5% of players who join a football club academy and who do not go on to have a career in professional football. And I've mentioned this before, that if you look at the data, and that's what nerds do, we look at data. If you take a look at the average educational attainment of a child who is coming into the world of football at the age of 9 or 10, they are of above average educational achievement at that age. And when they are leaving those academies at the ages of 14, 15, 16 and so on, they are below average. The world of football, the world of professional football, has let those kids down. And it doesn't. It does have a duty of aftercare, and some clubs, to be fair to them, do try to offer some assistance, and others go through the motions. They pay lip service to this. So what Trent Alexander-Arnold is doing, he says, I know the lads that I was training with, and he was discovered at the age of 6, and some of them, it was a devastating blow, because they not only wanted to be professional footballers, they wanted to be professional footballers for Liverpool because they're from Liverpool, they're from the surrounding area, they love the club, their mums and dads love the club, and they've sacrificed their education. And the other thing that we notice with kids of this age is that they also sacrifice their friends, because everything is geared towards you're training at the academy 2 nights a week. You've got to make compromises and sacrifices, and not only have they lost out in terms of their education, but they've lost out on that bond that we form with our friends, which can be, and we both know as men that we're pretty rubbish at expressing our feelings, and actually having somebody you can trust who's your age, is going through the same things that you're going through, is of immense benefit. There are too many men's mental health issues. This scheme by Trent Alexander-Arnold is trying to address in whatever way he can do, and he's got to be commended, A, for highlighting the issues, and B, for putting some resource into it. But we've got the elite player performance plan. Why isn't this doing more? The Premier League trumpets it as this wonderful scheme. There are too many kids who are falling through the gaps. There are too many kids whose education and future as successful people in other careers is being compromised, because the clubs will never admit this, but in order to have a successful academy, you need to have opponents to the kids that they've already identified, effectively the kids who are glorified tomato cans. And that sounds really cruel, and I don't mean it to be, because let's face it, there'll still be 100 times better football than I ever would have been, but they're just not going to make the grade. The professional football owes those children a greater sense of responsibility than we're getting at present, and fair play to Trent Alexander-Arnold for putting his money behind his mouth and getting this scheme up and going.
Well said. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that would be very kind. You can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, either accost me in the street or direct message Kieran, or do what everybody else does and email questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as the match between Chelsea and Arsenal was kicked off, very quickly, thank you very much for the support for the show. If you want to do it in another way, give us a review using your app. We don't care what you write. You could have it even say, we'd rather have the show presented by Mike Ashley and Simon Le Bon. Wouldn't bother me, because I want to go and watch the football now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.